Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
Over the weekend, Optus confirmed its second 000 outage in less than 2 weeks. The latest incident affected thousands of New South Wales customers, and it follows an outage linked to 4 deaths earlier this month. But Optus isn't the only telco to report emergency call disruptions in recent years. You might remember a high-profile Telstra outage in 2024. So what's going on with our 000 system? In today's podcast, we are going to unpack these latest outages and explain how Australia's emergency call service works, who is responsible for it, and what happens when it fails.
So, Optus has been in the headlines a lot this month, and I feel like there has been so much going on that it's kind of hard to know where to start.
Yeah.
But I think we should start with what happened over the weekend, the last thing that has happened. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So this latest outage was linked to a mobile phone tower in the Wollongong suburb of Dapto in New South Wales that affected around 4,500 users in the area on Sunday between 3 a.m. and 12:20 p.m. So for over 9 hours. Now, Optus said it's reviewed 9 failed calls to 000 during that time, including one instance where a caller required an ambulance and used another phone to contact emergency services. But the telco said that all of those who were impacted are okay, to use its own language, and that the issue has been fixed.
And so the reason why this made such big news is because it's actually the second outage this month. Do you want to tell us about the first one?
Yeah, so on September 18th, Optus experienced a technical failure, is what it called it, during a network upgrade. Now, this failure impacted 000 calls in large parts of the country across multiple states, including South Australia, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia. There were also some calls in New South Wales that were impacted, and that's because they were closer to the SA border, so those calls relied on South Australian mobile towers. Optus said that it happened during a regular upgrade. So it was conducting a routine upgrade in the early hours of the 18th of September, a Thursday. And it said that its initial testing and monitoring after that upgrade was rolled out didn't indicate any issues. So on Optus's side, things all looked fine, but it became aware of a problem when 2 customers contacted the telco to report that they couldn't contact 000.
And how did Optus respond to that?
So according to Optus CEO Stephen Rue, once it was notified, quote, "We stopped the upgrade, restoring 000 and notified relevant stakeholders, including police and government agencies." Approximately 600 calls were identified to have failed during that outage, which lasted around 13 hours. And once it had pulled all the records from the network and had all the call details of all the failed 000 calls, Optus commenced welfare checks. So that involves reaching out to every single person that tried to call 000 and couldn't. And during those checks, the CEO, Stephen Rue, confirmed 3 people had died after the household was unable to contact emergency services.
What do we know about those deaths?
So the deaths include a 68-year-old woman from South Australia, a 74-year-old man in Western Australia, and an 8-week-old boy. But we have since heard from SA Police that while the family of that baby was impacted by the outage, it's unlikely to have contributed to the death of the baby. So preliminary investigations by SA Police say that the grandmother of the boy attempted to contact 000 using her phone. When she couldn't get through, she immediately used another mobile telephone in the house, which did successfully connect to 000. A couple of days after the outage, we heard about an additional death, a 4th death linked to this outage, and that was reported in WA, a 49-year-old Perth man. His body was discovered by police during a welfare check. That welfare check was triggered by his failed call.
And do we know what exactly caused this outage?
So the Optus CEO has blamed the outage on human error. Basically what he has called an employee failure to follow established protocols for a routine firewall upgrade. And we don't have, a lot more than that. There's some technical, terminology around that failure, but I don't think it, changes the fact that this is a human error that Optus is attributing the outage to. As for the most recent outage, that one near Wollongong over the weekend, at the time of recording, we don't actually know what happened. Optus said it's continuing to investigate the cause of the issue, but that service has been restored. So we don't know what happened near Wollongong, but we do know that users in that area can now contact 000 without any issues.
What I've been surprised to learn about this is that what telephone company you're with does actually impact your ability to call 000. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question is, how does Australia's emergency call system actually work? Like, why is it connected to what telephone company you're with?
So in a perfect situation, if everything is going smoothly, it shouldn't actually matter who your telco is, and I'll explain why. What's really important to understand is that Telstra plays a huge role in our 000 service. It's recognised by the federal government as the, quote, emergency call person for 000, also for 112. If you call 112, that's like the international emergency number. No matter what country you're in, 112 will connect you with the relevant emergency services.
Okay, wait, pause. 2 things that I've learned.
Yes.
So Telstra is, you said, the emergency contact person?
So that's what the kind of communications legislation, the regulatory framework has designated as its title. But what that means is that Telstra is responsible for providing the service that answers calls to 000.
Oh, I see.
And it transfers them to the requested emergency service organisation with relevant details. So when a person calls 000, they will speak to a Telstra operator who will designate their call to emergency services. So that's the person that answers the call and says,
Yep.
you know, do you need police, ambulance, firefighters? What's going on? Are you safe? What do you need? And then they will pass that information on to the relevant authority.
Got it. And then the second thing I learned, I've never heard of 112 before.
Yeah, this was something that I didn't know either. So 112 apparently is the number. If you are overseas and you don't know the number for wherever you are, it's 112, not 911.
Interesting. And does that mean that if you are in the situation where there is an outage, maybe you don't know that there's an outage, but for some reason you're not able to call 000, do you then call 112 and it should work?
Hi, I'm Ola.
And I'm Elliot.
We're the 2-person team behind everything video and audio here at the Daily Aus.
If you want to help us grow so we can deliver more of the content that you love, be sure to hit subscribe.
Now let's get back to the video.
If it's not working, as in these outages that we're talking about today, if those systems aren't working, then it doesn't matter if you call 000 or 112. So Telstra is the national operator of 000, regardless of which mobile network you're on. But this is where it kind of gets a little bit more complicated. Telstra operates the 000 service, but all mobile networks have obligations to ensure your call can reach Telstra. So if for whatever reason you cannot connect to the network that you're subscribed to, be that Optus, Vodafone, TPG, those telcos have an obligation to ensure that your phone will attempt to roam and connect via another carrier's network. This is called camping on. Bear with me because I know it's a little bit complex, but basically, if your home network, let's say you're an Optus customer. If your
I'm
home
Vodafone.
She's Vodafone. Great. Well, full disclosure, I am with Optus still.
Oh, perfect.
If your home network isn't working, your phone should automatically connect to any available network for emergency calls. So Optus, Vodafone, TPG, Telstra, they all have a relationship where they work together to ensure that this camping on procedure can work. And they work together to make that work because they have to by law. So in Australia, those networks are required to take emergency calls from customers of competing networks through that mechanism.
Okay, so just to recap where we are, Telstra is responsible for the 000 network. And so when anyone who's with any telephone company calls 000, they are speaking to a Telstra provider, a Telstra person.
Yes, but Telstra is not responsible for the whole network. All providers are responsible for the whole network.
Got it. They're just responsible for who you're speaking to on the other side of the phone.
Exactly.
Got it. But your provider, so that could be Optus in your case, Vodafone in my case, they are responsible for making sure that you can always reach 000. And if they're not able to provide that or facilitate that, then another network needs to be able to pick up your call.
Exactly. So those providers are responsible for ensuring customers can reach 000, including through their network or through camping on procedures. And Telstra are responsible for making sure that your call will be answered by a person at a desk who will facilitate passing it on to the relevant emergency services.
Got it. And so I guess the next question is, why did this camping on process, this fallback process, not work here?
So Optus is still investigating why, but the problem seems to be that the Optus network couldn't actually detect that there was any issue. So testing in place after the upgrade on that bigger outage appeared to show that everything was working. Everything seemed fine as far as Optus could tell. So the specific part of the network that handles emergency calls needs to know it's broken in order to activate the camping on. So there needs to be a red flag that says, okay, this person has tried to call 000 and they're not getting through with our cell towers, so we need to put their call through a Vodafone tower or a Telstra tower over there. Optus plainly, it seems, didn't know that that issue was occurring. So last week it announced an independent review into the technical failure on the 18th of September. That's the big one that was linked to multiple deaths. It said the review will, quote, identify the causes and canvass the applicable processes, protocols and operations of the incident. And it will also examine the operational management of 000 calls in the Optus network and the actions that Optus took in response to the incident, including whether or not it adhered to its legislative requirements. So the findings from that are expected to be handed down by the end of the year.
I think it's fair to say that it's quite a significant failure. I think Optus has basically said that themselves.
Yeah, they've owned it and they've apologised.
Yes.
Yep.
And so what I'm interested in is what happens now. I know there is the Australian Communications and Media Authority. They are responsible for regulating this space. So now that this failure has happened, what does ACMA do in response?
Yeah, so ACMA basically responds by ensuring or investigating telcos like Optus to see if they have carried out their obligations, that they've met their legal requirements, and basically to look into what they did before and after the outage. So ACMA can impose significant penalties, and in terms of what Optus might be preparing itself for, this isn't the first time Optus has been in trouble under investigation for a similar issue. It's also not the first time an Aussie telco has been in trouble for a similar issue. There was a Telstra outage in 2024, which was to do with the 000 call centre, so a little bit different. There were breaches identified there and a $3 million penalty. But for Optus, there was this 2023 outage that accrued a total penalty of more than $12 million from ACMA. So that outage disrupted services for over 10 million customers. It impacted the ability of some calls to get through to 000. 10 million is huge. It's a bigger scale than we've seen in the last few weeks for Optus. But the outcomes of the most recent outages, you could argue, have been much more devastating. So that event in 2023 led to a government review. There were a bunch of recommendations aimed at preventing a recurrence, but there's obviously been a failure.
Has ACMA said what they will do about this failure?
So ACMA has launched an investigation into Optus regarding the September 18 outage. That will involve closely examining not just the outage and the fallout, but how did Optus communicate with its customers, to the public, governments, etc.? How did it notify, or when did it notify Telstra as the emergency call person about the outage? How did it speak with National Emergency Management and ACMA and the government about what was going on? If Optus is found to have failed under these obligations to those stakeholders, it will face serious consequences. As mentioned, there was that $12 million fine for the 2023 outage. Given that there already has been a penalty, that there already has been action, I think ACMA will be taking that into account, that this is, not the first time that there has been potential breaches by Optus. There may have been a failure to enact recommendations by authorities about how to prevent this from happening again. So I would say ACMA will be coming down sternly on Optus here. The Communications Minister, Annika Wells, has said that Optus failed the Australian people. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called the telco's behaviour completely unacceptable.
Yesterday, I saw some headlines that the opposition leader, Susan Lee, is calling for a complete review of how 000 is working in the country.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So the coalition has said that the actions of Optus are not good enough. It's referred to that review over the 2023 emergency outage. There were recommendations handed down that have been delayed, and essentially the Communications Minister has said that some of those oversights will be fast-tracked to kind of improve accountability and end-to-end oversight of 000. But Susan Lee, the opposition leader, said that Optus has now been responsible for 3 catastrophic failures, and she is calling for an independent inquiry into the whole 000 ecosystem. In that press conference on Monday, Lee said, "Governments have a responsibility here. The ecosystem needs an urgent inquiry, not just by the regulator, not just by tiptoeing around the government, but to stand up and fight for Australians who deserve answers." Optus is under incredible scrutiny at all levels of government and across all parties. The South Australian government has criticised it for how it communicated about the outage, noting delays between the company finding out about the issue and actually notifying authorities. The South Australian Premier's office was only notified of the incident at the same time as a press conference from the Optus CEO. So, we can all probably agree that's not a great way for officials to have to learn about something like this.
Okay, and so in terms of what happens now, so we have this ACMA review that they have said that they are doing. We have Optus saying that they are conducting their own independent review. And then we also have a potential independent inquiry that Susan Lee, the opposition leader, is pushing for. So a lot of different reviews potentially going on, and it will be interesting to see what the result of those are.
Exactly. Clearly something is missing from the current system, but it does feel like a lot of attention is being paid to the system, to Optus's actions, and I'm sure we will know more in the coming weeks and months.
Em, thank you so much for explaining it to us.
Thanks, Billi.
And thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Daily Aus. We'll be back this afternoon with your evening headlines, but until then, have a great day.